And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, Newt Gingrich will join us in just a minute, plus part one of our interview with President George W. Bush about his brand new book, Portraits of Courage. But first, out-of-touch, liberal Hollywood elites spewing hate and attacking the president at the Oscars in a pretty disgusting display. And that is tonight's opening monologue. Yes, yet another self-congratulatory award show, as if there isn't enough. So-called tolerant liberal celebrities gathering last night at the Oscars, all patting themselves on the back and predictably bashing President Donald Trump. Now, it didn't take long for host Jimmy Kimmel to go after the commander-in-chief. Watch this.
This broadcast is being watched live by millions of Americans and around the world in more than 225 countries that now hate us. And I think that is an amazing thing. I want to say thank you to President Trump. I mean, remember last year when it seemed like the Oscars were racist? We're at the Oscars, the Academy Awards. You're nominated. You got to come. Your families are nominated. Your friends. Some of you will get to come up here on this stage tonight and give a speech that the President of the United States will tweet about in all caps during his 5 a.m. bowel movement tomorrow.
Imagine if we talked about Obama's 5 a.m. bowel movements, what the reaction would be. By the way, you notice there are a lot of these award shows. Where are the award shows for firemen, policemen, EMTs, doctors, nurses, people who save other people's lives? What you have here, holier than thou, Hollywood elites, they're just huge hypocrites. They distort everything the president says or does, but they stand by in complete silence when President Obama, for example, said things divisive like this. Take a look.
So it's not surprising then that they get bitter and they claim to guns or religion or antipathy towards people who aren't like them.
I need you to go out and talk to your friends and talk to your neighbors. I want you to talk to them whether they're independent or whether they are Republican. I want you to argue with them and get in their face. We got to have middle-class families up in front. We can't, we don't mind the Republicans joining us. They can come for the ride, but they got to sit in back. If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you are president, you will accept their support after you're president.
You know what, President Obama, he tore the country apart with that type of divisive rhetoric, and instead of calling it out and actually practicing what they preach, well, the Hollywood left, they stood by President Obama every single step of the way. Hollywood didn't care about Obama's failed leftist economic policies and how it led to this country's precipitous decline, hurt millions and millions of Americans in the process. You know why? You have overpaid Hollywood elites. They weren't impacted by this. They weren't a part of the 95 million Americans out of the labor force, the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, or nearly 14 million more Americans on food stamps while Obama's president, or 8 million more Americans in poverty when he was president, nearly 50 million total. Their families weren't struggling like the rest of America to find these jobs, suffering in poverty on food stamps. They didn't care at all that President Obama accumulated more debt than every other president before him combined. Nope, their reality is not the world that you, the American people, live in. They're in a giant liberal bubble, and they're completely out of touch. They don't seem to care about middle America, do they? They don't care about all the people there in red states who voted for President Trump. As a matter of fact, they're really mocking us. And by the way, Hollywood hypocrites, they advocate for policies they're not impacted by. For example, Hollywood, they want to flood the country with unvetted refugees. Great. Well, let's put them up in Beverly Hills in their mansions. Let's put them in Malibu. Let's see how quickly they might change their minds. Now, we all know that wouldn't take very long. What's even more disturbing is how last night at the Oscars, Hollywood heaped praise on an Iranian filmmaker who boycotted the award show because of Donald Trump's temporary travel ban. Take a look at the statement that was read on his behalf after he won an Academy Award, the best foreign language film. Watch this.
I'm sorry I'm not with you tonight. My absence is out of respect for the people of my country and those of other 6 nations whom have been disrespected by the inhumane law that bans entry of immigrants to the U.S. Dividing the world into the us and our enemies categories creates fear, a deceitful justification for aggression and war. These wars prevent democracy and human rights in countries which have themselves been victims of aggression.
Really? Lecture from a guy from Iran, Hollywood cheering for this guy? The world's #1 state sponsor of terror, a country that chants death to America, death to Israel, repeatedly vows to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, burns the American flag, the Israeli flag. Now, this Iranian filmmaker, maybe he should try standing up to the mullahs in his own country before attacking America. Hollywood also appears to be oblivious to the fact that the 7 countries impacted by President Trump's temporary travel ban, how do they treat women, gays and lesbians, religious minorities, Christians and Jews? Of course, Hollywood, they weren't done attacking President Trump's policies. You have this actor, this guy, El Garcia Bernal. Look at him take another shot at the president. Take a look at this.
As a Mexican, as a Latin American, as a migrant worker, as a human being, I'm against any form of wall that wants to separate us.
Really? If those walls are so bad, why do so many Hollywood liberal elites and actors and actresses have walls around their mansions? They're not inviting us in. It's because these people are total frauds. My message tonight to these snowflakes is very simple. You people disgust me. You're out of touch with real Americans. Millions of Americans suffered because of the president you supported. And because your movies, by the way, and the issues, you don't want to reflect American values. So my advice to Hollywood, keep going the way you're going. The more you continue to undermine the president and the country and defend, a guy that lectures us when he lives in the #1 state sponsor of terror and won't dare take them on, you know what? It means more of the American people will just discover how irrelevant you all are. Joining us now with reaction, New York Times bestseller, Treason, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. That was quite an opening.
Well, do you think that, can you give me one award show for nurses, for surgeons that save people's lives, for EMTs, for firemen, policemen, garbage men, construction workers? Where are their award show? I don't see any award shows for them.
Well, I think that's right, but I'll just give you one fact that shows you what a phony Jimmy Kimmel's reasoning was. He talked about 220 countries that don't like us. Those folks in Hollywood make a large part of their profit out of all those countries, and they know that their movies have to sell worldwide. And the fact is, those countries like our movies, and most people in those countries would like to live in the U.S. We don't have a problem of Americans trying to leave to go somewhere else. We have the challenge that all over the world, people want to come to the U.S., admire the U.S., and believe that we are a country that offers great opportunity. And, you know, you can start from there, and the whole rest of that stuff is just baloney.
Do we really have to get lectured? Congratulations to the Iranian that won the award, but do we really need lectures from an Iranian when their country brutalizes women as fourth-class citizens, kills gays and lesbians? All they need to do in Hollywood, go to YouTube and take a look, because the videos are out there. They can look at them chanting death to America, wanting to annihilate Israel. I mean, I thought they had a monopoly of compassion for these groups. Apparently not.
No, look, I think you have to start by saying almost nobody in that room is a serious person. They're all actors who act, and they all have a vague, unrealistic sense of the world, and you shouldn't take them seriously. It's like having, you know, a cousin or a brother-in-law who you know is a doofus, and you wouldn't loan him your car, but, you know, he comes by and he watches a ball game with you, and you go, yeah, I understand, Herbie. These folks are not serious people. They're very often great actors and actresses. They very often produce very entertaining products. I love movies. I've loved movies my whole life. But you shouldn't take them as though they were serious people, because nothing they do about the real world is serious, except they love money.
That is a good point, and they're not making as much as they used to, and nor are people watching the Academy Awards ones like they used to. You actually had a great comment about fake news, warning about what is a new threat. And I love the president in his press conference. I thought it was one of the greatest beatdowns I ever witnessed any president give to the press. And then he backed out of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I wanted to get your reaction to it. And why is it so dangerous?
Look, I think fake news, which is really based on fake education, is extraordinarily dangerous because it teaches people things that aren't true. What President Trump said goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan in his nationwide speech for Barry Goldwater in 1964, when Reagan said, "It isn't what liberals don't know that's so dangerous, it's what they know that isn't true that's so dangerous." Well, we've now had 50 years of liberals getting more and more out of touch with reality. We have professors who will bully students to force them to learn things that are false. We have entire courses in college that are idiotic. And we have reporters who come up through that system, and they have as much fake education as behind their fake news. It's dangerous for a country. How do you have a serious, you saw this last night, how do you have a serious conversation in a country where your elites think that Iran is okay, while the Iranians actually put paint, death to Israel, on the missiles that they're testing? I mean, this is a level of nonsense, and I'm proud of President Trump for having the courage to boil down Ronald Reagan's critique into a very simple phrase. You have fake news, it's based on fake education, it's time we took it head on.
Well said. All right, Mr. Speaker, stay right there. We'll have more with the Speaker. And coming up tonight, we've got a new segment. It's called Holding Washington Accountable. And later, Fox and Friends co-hosts interviewed President Trump earlier today at the White House. They asked him about his big address to Congress tomorrow, about the Oscars and the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright. Good evening. Here's what's happening. The Senate approving billionaire investor Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary in a 72-27 vote. The 79-year-old Ross has pledged to rework the North American Free Trade Agreement quickly. Ross, who is worth an estimated $2.9 billion, has promised to divest from his private equity firm. A small plane crashing into two homes in Southern California tonight. The fiery impact killed at least one person and injured 5 others. The Cessna 310 crashed shortly after taking off from Riverside Municipal Airport. Also in the news tonight, another wave of bomb threats against Jewish centers and schools across the country. No bombs were found and all buildings have been cleared. It's the 5th round of such threats against Jewish institutions since January. And let's look at news right now. I'm Kelly Wright. We take you back now to Hannity.
And welcome back to Hannity. So tomorrow night, President Trump will address a joint session of Congress where he will discuss his vision and agenda for America. But tonight, ahead of that big speech, we are starting a new segment on the program. It's called Holding Washington Accountable. So during my recent sit-down and my interview with the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he told me President Trump's agenda will be enacted in 200 days legislatively. Watch this. You're in pretty much full agreement with what Donald Trump ran on.
Yes.
And number 2, in 200 days from the legislative side, you are going to be implementing every aspect of that agenda that we talked about.
Yep. And just to
That's
add
a big headline.
And we have cushion in our schedule. If anything slips because it's really because of Senate issues, we still have time to accommodate all of this stuff in 2017. So I even have safety valves. I have cushions built in the schedule to make sure this all gets done in 2017.
I believe
in case something happens and goes sideways on the Senate.
I'm pretty sure that'll stimulate the economy, get people back to work, and get the economy moving again, which I think we need.
That's what we're hired to do.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we'll see you in 200 days.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you. So maybe before then.
All right, we continue with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. All right, so I gave a pretty hard-hitting monologue on this program and on radio how the president's moving at the speed of Trump, the speed of light. Congress, you know, they said they'd have a plan in the first week. Then it became the spring, the summer, even some saying by the end of the year on Obamacare. And so I went and the Speaker said, nope, it's all legislatively going to be done in 200 days. He said that the health care bill, consensus bill, was being scored by the CBO. Then on my radio show, I interviewed Jim Jordan. And I interviewed Congressman Dave Bratton, I interviewed Congressman Mark Meadows, and they all said they'd never even seen the bill that's being scored. And I'm like, what's going on here? I'm getting nervous. Does that concern you?
No, I think it's a process of people trying to get things done. I think that's the legislative process. Look, I think that there's going to be a lot of turmoil, and I think Paul Ryan thinks that. That's why he said to you he's built in some cushion. These are huge, huge issues, and people can legitimately disagree about different parts of it. The leadership is going to have a bill to repeal Obamacare and replace it. The leadership's also going to have a tax bill sometime this summer.
Can I just ask one question, though?
Enormous bills.
How is it possible they haven't shared the bill with the House, but yet it's being scored by CBO, and these Republicans don't know what's in it?
Well, I think it's possible because, frankly, they're going to have to keep playing with the bill in terms of legislative drafting until they can get it scored right. I personally would abolish the Congressional Budget Office. I think it is a very big mistake to allow them to be the arbiters. They were totally wrong on Obamacare. They are dishonest, and they frankly were wrong by such a huge margin. It's absurd to let them be responsible. But I understand what Ryan's trying to do. Ryan wants to find a bill as a baseline, bring it to the conference and say, look, this is a core document. Now, let's argue about amendments. Let's argue about a variety of steps. He's not going to get a single bill through on that scale without amendments. And he knows that. And he knows that, for example, the Freedom Caucus, the conservative wing of the party, is going to be fighting over a couple of issues. He's also got to raise the question, will he get a single Democratic vote? Because if he has to carry the whole thing on the Republican side, he has a relatively narrow margin for error.
All right, I'm impatient by nature. I've had a sense of urgency since I came out of the womb. I like to get things done faster. Am I being too impatient and expecting? Like, I was a little upset they didn't have a replacement consensus bill already done after Election Day. And it seems that this is going a little too slow for me. Is 200 days about right legislatively? You got a lot done in 100 days.
Well, we got a lot done in the House in 100 days.
Right.
But I suspect you go back and look at how long it took us working with the Senate. These are very different institutions. And the challenge that Mitch McConnell has as majority leader with 52 votes in the Senate is radically different than the challenge that Speaker Ryan has. And frankly, I like Speaker Ryan's job a lot better because you have a lot more power and a lot more control. But there's another thing to remember, Sean. You and I were very convinced that Donald Trump would win. We were very convinced that it mattered for American history that Donald Trump would win. But there were a lot of people who just were throwing their hearts into the election. They weren't thinking about this stuff. They were just thinking about how do we beat Hillary Clinton. And I think this is very different than either Reagan. Reagan had 16 years from the time he gave his first great Goldwater speech to the time he got to be the president. I had, ironically, 16 years from the time I arrived as a freshman until we became a majority and I was speaker. We had a long time to build this thing, think it through, work with people like the Heritage Foundation. Now you got a brand new presidency, and it is totally different. I'm working on a book now called Understanding Trump, and I can tell you, Trump is so different from any president I've ever seen. I mean, you got to go back in many ways to Andrew Jackson to have a real feel for him, to Theodore Roosevelt in some other ways. But this guy is different. Well, now you got Ryan, who, remember, at one point there was real tension. You had Ryan and you had Trump like this. They've been having dinner. They've been talking with each other. Reince Priebus is doing a great job because he is Paul Ryan's closest friend, and he is Donald Trump's chief of staff. They're gradually coming together. I think that's a big deal. Okay, so 200 days you think is a real possibility in terms of the time frame, and you don't think it... All right, listen, I'm willing to take the speaker at his word, but I was surprised that fellow congressmen, Republicans, had no idea about the bill. That surprised me, but I'll keep an eye on it. We're going to hold them accountable. What? We should. Well, let me just say this. McConnell and Ryan are both very strong, very mature personalities. Both of them centralize things more than I would, but that's their style. They're now working with Trump, and they're getting to know each other better and better. These are three really determined people. I suspect that 200 days fits exactly within where the Trump team wants to be. And I think you're going to see, like, I mean, look, you know me. If this stuff breaks down, I'm going to be on the show saying it's breaking down. I'm not going to cover for it. All right, that's a promise. But I'm moderately optimistic, okay? I was more optimistic when I talked to him than less optimistic when I talked to the other guys. So, all right, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Good to see you. All right, Newt Gingrich will be back with us tomorrow night. We will be in D.C. at a special time, 11 Eastern. We will be reacting to President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress. And ahead of tomorrow's big speech, the Fox and Friends team, they interviewed President Trump today at the White House. Ainsley Earhart will join us from the White House with highlights. And then later, I traveled down to Dallas, Texas to interview President George W. Bush about his brand new book, Defeating ISIS, and so much more. That's all coming up on this busy...
Hey, welcome back to Hannity. So President Trump is getting ready to address a joint session of Congress. That's tomorrow night. A few hours ago, Fox and Friends co-hosts Steve Doocy, Brian Kilmeade, Ainsley Earhart, they sat down with the president to ask about his speech tomorrow night and so much more. Take a look.
All I can do is speak from the heart and say what I want to do. We have a really terrific, I believe, health care plan coming out. We have to understand Obamacare has been a disaster. It's way out of control. And I'll be talking about the military. I'll be talking about the border. And remember this, on the border and throughout our country, we're getting the bad ones out, the bad people, gang members, drug lords, in some cases murderers. Over the years, you make a mistake. Sure. I fully understand when they hit you. But when they make stories up, when they create sources, because I believe that sometimes they don't have sources. You know, the sources don't exist. And sometimes they do exist. I'm not saying all sources, but I believe that a lot of the sources are made up. A lot of the stories are made up. I believe a lot of the stories are pure fiction. They just pull it out of air. Now, with all of that being said, I just thought it would be better if I didn't do the dinner. That doesn't mean I'm not going to do it next year, but I just thought it would be better if I didn't do that.
Mr. President, the Oscar awards, Jimmy Kimmel, he was tweeting, he was saying some crude comments. He tweeted that he insinuated, at least, that you were racist. What's your response?
Well, look, you know, it just seems the other side, whenever they are losing badly, they always pull out the race card. And I've watched it for years. I've watched it against Ronald Reagan. I've watched it against so many other people. And they always like pulling out the race card. The fact is, I did pretty well, much better than past people in the Republican Party in the recent election, having to do with Hispanics, having to do with African Americans. Did pretty well, or I wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, if I didn't get numbers that were at least as good or better, I wouldn't be sitting here.
All right, this full interview will air tomorrow 6 to 9 a.m. on Fox and Friends. That's Eastern Time. Joining us now with a preview is Fox and Friends co-host, our friend Ainsley Earhart. Well, that's a lot, and that's just a small portion. You got about his agenda, the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You asked him about the Oscars. Take us in to the interview room, and how long did you have with him? Tell us about the day.
He spent a lot of time with us, Sean. This is the press briefing room, and right next door is the White House. And we walked in and we sat down with him in the East Room, and he chatted with us for about 30 minutes sitting in the chairs. And then he gave us a tour for the people, for our viewers, of the Oval Office. And we happened to run into Melania. She was sitting planning the next event because they had the governor's ball last night. She talked about that. But we did ask him so many things. We asked him about the speech. Tomorrow night he is addressing Congress. We talked to him about the military spending the $54 billion that he wants to spend on the military. I asked him about Senator John McCain saying that is not going to be enough. He talked about how he's going to pay for that expense for the $54 billion. We asked him about tweeting. People on both sides of the aisles are saying he needs to stop tweeting, that he needs to stop attacking his enemies. We asked him if he's going to do that. We also asked him to grade his performance on a grade from an A to an F. And he gave himself an A, but in one category, he gave himself a C, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because everyone at home has to watch tomorrow between 6 and 9 a.m.
All right, you have to tune in. Two prominent things, though. The Oscars, it was unprecedented, the attacks last night, and I was glad you asked that question, and the White House Correspondents' Dinner. What did he say about both of those things? A little more detail.
White House Correspondents' Dinner, he said he is not going to go because he just says he doesn't want to be there, that the people that have attacked him, they're the ones that are going to be sitting in that room, and he wants to get to work for the American people, and he's going to be working that night and doesn't want to be at a social event that night in front of the people that he doesn't feel like are fair to him, that are producing fake news.
Yeah, well, and you know what? They haven't really been fair to him from my perspective, too, and he seemed to take the Oscar issue pretty well. I'm actually on the other side. I was originally thinking maybe he shouldn't tweet. I like the Twitter. I think it works.
A lot of people do. He said the people that don't like his tweeting, those are the enemies. Because we asked him specifically, many people are wanting you to stop attacking your enemies. And he said the people who want me to stop attacking the enemy, that is the enemy.
All right, Ainsley, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. And
you're welcome.
Quick programming. Don't forget, set your alarm, wake up early. Watch Ainsley's interview and Fox and Friends interview with Donald Trump tomorrow morning, 6 to 9 Eastern on Fox and Friends. When we come back, I traveled to Dallas, Texas to interview President George W. Bush about his new book. I got his thoughts on defeating ISIS and much more. Part 1 of that interview. And then later tonight, Sheriff... Welcome back to Hannity. So President George W. Bush, since leaving office, has begun painting as a pastime. And in his brand new book, Portraits of Courage, a Commander-in-Chief's tribute to America's warriors, well, the president includes dozens of oil paintings that he created of American heroes and their stories. Now, yesterday, I traveled to Dallas, Texas, to talk to the 43rd President of the United States about this and more. Now, over the course of the week, we will be airing portions of this interview. Here's part one. Mr. President,
Yes,
how are
sir.
you? Good to see you.
Good to be back with you.
Good to have you. I just now gone through this part of your museum. I am stunned, shocked. I don't even know how to even describe it. You've only been painting 5 years, less than 5.
Yeah.
Tell us how you picked it up.
Well, I was a little antsy. I mean, when you're the president, your dance card is full.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're not the president. And so Laura and I spent a lot of time here at the Bush Center putting programs in place that'll make a difference in people's lives. I wrote 2 books. I'm staying fit. I'm mountain biking and elliptical. And, I play a fair amount of golf. But it wasn't enough, and so I read Winston Churchill's essay, Painting as a Pastime, and my attitude basically is that old boy can paint, I can paint.
You love animals, so you started painting
pets.
Pets. Jasper, you did Dana's pet.
I did,
yes.
And I did Bob the cat in our house. I was a pet portrait painter, which is kind of hard to say. But,
yeah.
So I painted pets, and the good thing about painting pets is they really don't react when they see their painting.
So, in other words, they can't say it's good or bad?
Yeah, but the owner can. But no, I did that, and then I started getting into landscapes. And my first instructor at SMU came and said, you ought to paint the leaders with whom you served. And I did. And we had an exhibition here.
Putin?
Putin and Blair and Dalai Lama and Angela Merkel. They were okay paintings. But the most important part of it was that I'd gotten to know them so well. During the presidency, I felt comfortable painting them, and we had a personal diplomacy exhibit here, which I think is really important in life, and I know it's important for a president to get to know leaders from other countries. And I got 2 new instructors, and one of them's a young guy who paints really fine portraits. And he said, you ought to paint people nobody knows. And it just dawned on me, they're like, boom, warriors who I'd gotten to know. And so I did. I painted all these warriors. I know every one of them. I know their stories. I had ridden mountain bikes with them. I played golf with them. And I admire them greatly.
So in the course of a year, I think there's 60-some-odd warrior paintings here.
Well, there's 60-something individuals, and on the montage, there's another 30-something. So it's about 98 warriors.
In a year?
Yeah.
That's a lot of paint. So how long would it take you to paint one person? Because I also saw the pictures of them. And I know in the book you call yourself a novice. This is not the work of a novice.
Well,
really.
I think it is, but thank you. That's flattering. It just depends until you finish. And, you really, that's one of the interesting questions for any artist is when are you through? And I would go upstairs and be painting, Milo, and look at Falkenberry's painting and said, I think I better paint on Falkenberry some more, and then go back to Milo. And so it was a process. And even when I look at them now, I kind of wish I had my paint and touch up a few things, but it never really ends.
It never ends. You're never satisfied, perhaps. I've known you a lot of years. 9/11 happens 9 months into your presidency. You were a wartime president. We were on a war footing the entire time you were there.
Right.
And I look back at the last two major conflicts in America. I look at Vietnam. We lost 58,000 people. We didn't finish the job. We left. Mm-hmm. I look at Iraq and Afghanistan, and here, many of these people that you're drawing, they won Mosul, Ramadi, Tikrit, Fallujah, Baghdad, only to, like Vietnam, or similar in my mind to Vietnam, because I thought it was the right decision. Mm-hmm. I still believe it was. But it's not the right decision if Washington politicizes it and then gives back that which they won. Mm-hmm. Does that frustrate you? Because that frustrates me.
Yeah. Yes, it frustrated me. And I think what people have got to realize is this bunch of thugs can be defeated, because we did so with the surge. And by the way, the president's new national security advisor was a part of that philosophy of how to win the hearts and minds of local populations, which is necessary for victory. And we can win again. Mm-hmm. And so you've heard both presidents, after my time, say we're going to degrade and defeat ISIS. And I say, go get them, because they can be degraded and defeated. And it's very important, in my mind, that we do so that people know they can rely upon us. And the people, not only governments, but people on the ground, people who want to be free. And you ask some of these troops, you know, were you able to see human deprivation and improvement? And they say yes. I mean, a lot of them say to me, I love the idea that girls being able to go to school for the first time in Afghanistan, or young kids in Iraq being no longer subjected to the thuggery of these ideological, thugs.
You warned that if we pulled out precipitously and too early, I played this on my shows many times.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you were 100% accurate.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
No.
Because, we're it in terms of defeating ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever you want to call them. I mean, these are people that murder the innocent to advance a point of view, and it requires U.S. leadership to defeat them. And this exhibit honors those who heard the call and volunteered, and were willing to be willing to risk their lives to not only defend ourselves but to advance liberty.
Two things about you that people might not know, which I think was the underpinnings of your passion for our military. Mm-hmm. You used to often would sneak over to Bethesda, mm-hmm. sneak over to Walter Reed.
Right.
Never wanted any cameras, nor did you want anybody to know.
Correct.
You did that a lot.
I did.
And a second thing is, I was on the campaign trail with you in Jacksonville, Florida in 2004. And it was at a big stadium.
Yeah, I remember that.
Where the Jaguars play. You flew Air Force One right over as you were flying in.
A little bit of a show off.
A little, yeah. But when you got there, you got out of your car, you went in a private room. Todd Beamer's father was in there. Other Gold Star families were in there. And I remember, because I saw it, I don't know if anyone else saw it, you came out of the room, and it was obvious you had been crying.
Yeah.
It happened a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a crier, and when a mom hugs me and talks about her son, it it affected me.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and this is hard for many people to understand, but when you go to Walter Reed and a soldier looks at you who's lost his leg and says, "I'd do it again," or you ride mountain bikes with these troops that some of whom lost a leg who went back into combat. Or a mother whose son lost their life and said, "I just want you to know my son died doing what he wanted to do." It lifts your spirit.
It's amazing people.
It is amazing. Yeah,
amazing people.
And hopefully my art is able to capture how amazing these people are.
And up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
We will fight violent crime, and we will win. And we'll win that one fairly quickly. Once we give the local police, the local law enforcement, the right to go in and fight it.
What a change a new president makes. President Trump standing by his campaign promise to support police. Sheriff David Clark joins us in studio.
Look at what's happening in our cities. You look at what's happening in Chicago. What's going on in Chicago? We will fight violent crime, and we will win. And we'll win that one fairly quickly. Once we give the local police, the local law enforcement, the right to go in and fight it. And we back them monetarily and also otherwise. We're going to win that one. We're going to win it fairly quickly, I believe.
All right, that was President Trump earlier today vowing to support America's law enforcement. Joining us now with reaction, the author of a huge, soon-to-be bestseller, Cop Under Fire, moving beyond hashtags of race, crime, and a politics for a better America. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, I am very honored to have written the foreword for this book, Sheriff, because I admire you greatly. There is such a difference between what we just heard and a president that rushes to judgment on high-profile race cases, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, Baltimore, Cambridge police, and ignored 4,000 people killed in his home city during that 8-year period.
In addition to the war on cops, which he was the maestro, he meaning former President Obama. But what we have now, Sean, as you know, is leadership has returned to the White House. after an 8-year absence. And when you get leadership, you're going to hear and you're going to see the type of things that President Trump is talking about. As time goes on, I think this country is going to realize that they made the right choice in November of 2016.
You talk about you're colorblind as it relates to the criminal justice system. You did not hold back. You have a whole chapter, Black Lives Matters Less to Black Lives Matters Than Lies and Leftist Politics, and then you say a hate group's battle cry.
That's what it is. And
explain what you, because people are going to go after you over this.
Sure, and they have been, and that's the purpose of this book. It's a deeper dive into some of the things that I've talked about on your program and other areas where you only get the benefit of sound bites. This is a deeper dive into my core and what I believe in and what I stand for. And you know, I wasn't raised, Sean, to look at everything through the race of prism by my mom and dad, okay? And that's when I talk about that colorblind, that thing that Dr. Martin Luther King espoused, you know, a colorblind society.
Content and character.
And so, you know, that helped me because, as you know, your childhood experiences and how you're raised really will form, for the most part, you know, how you go on and lead your life. But it was a very ugly time in America, the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a political construct. And I said that in December of 2014. That didn't just come out in this book, but that was a soundbite type of thing. But then as people get in, and I encourage them to read the whole thing, they'll see what I meant when I said, you know, this is really not about black lives.
Sheriff,
this is about a political construct.
If you say, oh, you can't say it's a hate group, but the group is on tape chanting, what do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now? Pigs, cops in a blanket, fry them like bacon. That to me is hatred. That is beyond hate. That is inciting violence against our law enforcement officers.
Without a doubt. And that stuff has been blanketed by the liberal mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You remember hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah.
Okay? One of the biggest lies in the history of politics. Never happened. And then you just saw the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, MSNBC, CNN just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, thanks, and then moved on from that, right? That's the political construct that I'm talking about. So, you know, this war on cops has been devastating, more so than for anybody else. Good, law-abiding black people who live in the American ghetto. The overwhelming amount of people that live in these ghettos that Donald Trump has said, and I believe him, that he's going to bring a better quality of life, better schools, safer neighborhood. But they've paid the biggest price for this war on police.
God is not the enemy, but he's being attacked. And you talk about faith changing the culture. I learned more about you than I had known before, and we've been friends a long time. And you really think that we've lost our way?
Without a doubt. And part of it is because this push towards secularism, you know, in our society by the ultra-left. You know, they've marginalized God. God has become the enemy. They don't want any mention of it in the public square. Things like prayer, prayer in school, praying after a football game. You'll see a lawsuit, you know, by some atheist group or by the ACLU. And the further we get away from that, and some of the founding fathers talked about that, you know, how the faith and how, you know, it was based on Christian doctrines. There's no doubt about that. You know, they said that that is really what puts together the Constitution of the United States. And we're talking about things like concern for your fellow man, okay, loving one another, those sorts of things. But if you look at the Constitution, and most people will see, it's littered, and I say that affectionately, it's littered with references to the Almighty, the Creator, you know, providence, the divine, so that sort of thing. So, and I'm guided by my faith, and you know, again, it's a deeper dive into who I am, and I've taken some whacks about that. Just about everything in this book, I've been whacked at for believing, but I don't care. You know me, Sean. I stand on principle. I know who I am as a human being, and I'm not afraid to articulate that. And when you do that, you put a target on your back, and they're going to come at you. So this is,
as you said, war has been declared on the American police officer, but you're one of the guys that I think is changing the narrative. The book is phenomenal. I learned a lot about you in this book.
That's what scares the left, though. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sean, thanks for all your help.
Thanks for being the great,
staunch
supporter of law enforcement that you are.
And thanks for your platform.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, well, when we come back, we need your help, our question of the day, and some of the voicemails. Some of you apparently don't like me that were left on the Hannity hotline. We'll play that straight ahead.
Trump is the cure. I watch the show every night. I love it. But you do got a big head. That's okay, man. Thanks.
Big head? It looks proportional. I don't know. All right, whether you have something nice to say, mean to say, it's fine. You see the number there on your screen, 877-225-8587, and we may play yours on the air. Now, before we go, quick programming note tonight as we move forward, because tomorrow night we will be in Washington, D.C. for the President's address to a joint session of Congress. Our coverage starts 1 hour later at 11 p.m. Eastern. We hope you tune in. Also, as you know, last week I lost a dear friend and colleague, our friend Alan Combs. So many of you have reached out to us, and your words and your comments mean more than you will ever know, both to his wife, Dr. Jocelyn Crowley, Monica Crowley, his family, and to me personally. And I just wanted to say thank you. And as always, thank you for being with us. We'll see you back here. Well, we'll see you from D.C. tomorrow night. Thanks for being